Yes.
And you are aware of what he testified about these bruises and abrasions on Mr. Goldman's knuckles. Is that correct?
I'm aware he testified regarding those, yes.
And with regard to that, did you, prior to giving us your opinion yesterday about how Mr. Goldman may have gotten these injuries to his hands, did you ever discuss that with your expert forensic pathologist regarding what those bruises connoted and what they meant?
No.
So you gave us you're not a doctor, right?
That's correct.
And you gave us an opinion yesterday without talking to the doctor who's assigned to this case, is that right?
That's my opinion that I gave you. I wouldn't elicit my opinion from anyone.
All right. This was your opinion, right?
That's correct. That's what I was asked.
Now, with regard to whether or not these killings were done by one individual, again, at the preliminary hearing, did you have occasion to listen to Dr. Golden and his testimony of whether or not he believed there may have been two knives involved or used at the time? Well,
Sustained.
let me state it this way. Did you hear Dr. Golden's testimony about the number of knives that he found may have been used at the time of these killings? At the preliminary hearing?
Same question. Same question. If he heard the testimony of Dr. Golden, yes or no, did he consider that?
All right. Did you hear the testimony of Dr. Golden, again, at the preliminary hearing?
Yes.
And did you consider that testimony as it relates to weapons prior to forming your opinion that you gave us yesterday?
Yes.
And did you discuss that testimony with Dr. Golden yesterday before you gave us your opinion about the number of weapons involved here?
I didn't discuss it with him yesterday. I have discussed the one or two weapon theory with Dr. Golden.
You've done that in the past?
Yes.
Can you tell us when was the last time you discussed that with Dr. Golden? Well, strike that. Did you discuss it with him after the preliminary hearing?
I believe it was after, yes.
Did you ever discuss it with him before the preliminary hearing?
I don't recall if there's any discussion during autopsy or not.
Did you write a report based upon your discussion with Dr. Golden?
I wrote a report, notes initially at the autopsy, yes.
No, I wanted to know, this was the conversation you had afterwards that you said where you talked about the number of weapons. Did you write a report about that conversation?
No.
So there's no report?
I don't believe there is. I'm not saying there's no report. I discussed this with another individual, and whether or not that individual made reports or not, I don't know.
In the course of your investigation, did you find any debris or any bark from a tree or anything of that nature on Mr. Goldman's hands or on any portion of his body?
I did not personally examine his hands.
All right, that's your answer. Did you find anything of that nature?
I didn't examine his hands, so I didn't find anything.
If you were to see a photograph of his hands, would you recognize that photograph from the autopsy at all?
If there was some identifier, perhaps. I couldn't just identify a hand, no.
All right, you were present at the autopsy and you observed these things, did you not?
That's correct.
Now, with regard to the hands of these two individuals, was your testimony yesterday that never in your experience as a homicide investigator have you ever bagged the hands of a victim other than in a circumstance where there was a gunshot wound? Is that what you said?
My experience has been that we bag the hands of gunshot victims.
Okay, you told us that. And from a standpoint of good forensic procedure, and have you read books on this subject at all?
On what, bagging hands?
Bagging hands and saving trace evidence.
Specifically, no.
You've never read a book on that subject, is that right?
Specifically on that subject, no.
Yes, sir.
No.
And in that connection, would you agree that the best way, or that experts agree the best way to preserve trace evidence is to bag hands and keep the hands separate? Would you agree with that?
I can't say that, no. I think it's important to attempt to preserve any evidence. There are different ways that one would go about doing that, and it doesn't necessarily include bagging of the hands.
But you've never read a book with regard to that, is that correct?
A book on bagging the hands?
Yes,
No, I
a book or any portion of a book regarding bagging of hands.
No.
With regard to the subject of lividity, which you talked about yesterday, have you ever read any articles or publications regarding lividity and what lividity is?
Yes.
And what did you read? What's the last thing you read in that connection?
Over the years, I've read several books. I've read criminal investigation, homicide investigation, various publications.
Have you ever, do you know what the term blanching is?
Yes.
And what is blanching?
Blanching is the touching of the skin after death in the area that has lividity in an attempt to see if that it would blanch if you touch, say, a red area that's lividity, you depress that area and the blanching of the whiteness remains. There's a good possibility that the person has been deceased for 4 or 5 hours or longer. Generally, if the redness would return, it may indicate that that person has been killed within 2, 3, or 4 hours, something under the 5 or 6 hours general guide.
All right, now, what to you does the term lividity mean?
Lividity is the sinking of the blood in the human body subsequent to death to its lowest point caused by a gravitational pull.
And if you have a fair-skinned individual, it might show up more than if it's somebody who has darker skin. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it would depend. In this particular case, you had a victim with very little blood in her, and not necessarily under those circumstances.
Well, that was as to the one victim. Did you check lividity as to both victims, did you not?
Just from what I could observe, they were fully, with the one victim, Mr. Goldman, was fully clothed. I couldn't observe any lividity.
And Miss Nicole Brown Simpson was clothed also, was she not?
She was clothed, yes.
All right. And with regard to her body, what, if anything, did you notice regarding lividity?
Under those circumstances at the scene, nothing.
Did you try? Did you touch her skin?
I wouldn't have touched her skin, no.
All right. You did not do that. So your observations were nothing regarding lividity in this particular case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And lividity, so that we're clear, is one of those conditions which one might use to try and determine the time of death. Is that correct? Along with other factors?
It's a very general indicator. I wouldn't depend entirely on lividity as a determined time of death.
I didn't ask you to depend entirely. I said, was that one of the factors that you might use to determine the time of death? Is that correct, sir?
One might.
All right. And what about you?
Again, it would depend on the circumstance. In this case, certainly not.
And that was because she lost so much blood?
Because she lost so much blood, there was no lividity that I could see, certainly on the back portion of her or her legs that were visible.
Right. But you'd made no palpable or no touching of that body. Is that right?
I did not touch
All
her.
right. Have you ever read a book put out by the National Institute of Justice Research Project entitled Identifying Plant Food Cells and Gastric Contents for Forensic Investigations, a Laboratory Manual? You ever read that?
No.
By Bach, Lane, and Norris?
No.
Have you ever read any publication at all about how stomach contents might be used to determine the time of death in individuals?
Read Lemoyne Snyder's homicide investigation that addresses that particular thing, but again, it's just one general indicator.
And Lemoyne Snyder, when did you read that last?
I've referred to it several times over the years.
When did you read it last?
Read it from cover to cover several years ago.
When was that?
Gosh, probably 10, 12, 15 years ago.
Is that the last time you read it?
Well, I refer to it from time to time. That'd be the last time I read it cover to cover.
And again, in that connection, you've told us that all these things are factors. But you take all these factors, whether lividity or stomach contents or whether the person had their last meal, and you put all those things together as an investigator, and you try to determine what the time of death is. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what you do? Can you answer that yes or no?
You attempt to, yes. But again, it's very general. Without an eyewitness, you're never going to be able to pinpoint the time of death.
We understand that. And if there are no eyewitnesses, we appreciate that. But what you do is you do the best you can with each homicide scene. Isn't that correct, sir?
Certainly do.
And what you do is you try to assemble a team of forensic pathologists, and you try to use that team. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if there's evidence that might help you determine certain things, you try to preserve that evidence. You don't throw it away. Isn't that correct?
Well, you're always going to attempt to preserve evidence, certainly.
And you try to do the best you can to gather all the facts. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
You've already shared with us that each case is somewhat different. Isn't that correct?
All cases are different.
Now, yesterday you described a term which you believed you call it a cast-off. Have you ever qualified as a blood splatter expert in any court in Los Angeles County before?
Yes,
And how many times?
twice.
And where was that?
In federal court once, and in the court of Judge James Basque, LA County Superior Court.
And when was that?
Approximately four years ago, perhaps.
Do you remember what the name of the case was?
Yes, it was the Kowal. Kowal was the victim. It was the Karamalis case.
Karamalis case?
K-A-R-I-M-A-L-I-S.
And with regard to this term cast-off, have you read any publications on that particular term?
Yes, I've read
What'd you read?
books on blood spatter analysis, crime scene analysis.
All right, in that connection, does that have to do, what the term cast-off, does it have to do with describing the velocity with which a splatter moves from one object to another? Is that correct?
Not necessarily the velocity, it's just describing a droplet of blood falling from, say, a weapon.
All right, and can you tell by looking at a splatter whether or not the droplet was a free fall or it was thrown from a distance? Can you tell that?
Yes.
And you, in this case, did you make an analysis in this case at the scene that day?
As to blood droplets, yes.
Yes, sir.
As to this particular, are you referring to a particular droplet or all of the
Talking
blood?
about the droplet you talked about yesterday on Naron Goldman's shoe.
Okay.
Did you make an analysis that day at that time at the scene?
No.
Well, when did you make your analysis? At a later time?
As to the fact it was a cast-off,
That's your belief it was a cast-off.
subsequent to that date,
And when was that? When did you first make that analysis?
I believe after information became available as to the identity of the blood that was contained.
And when was that? Give us the month or the year.
Might have been September, October last year.
1994?
Yes.
Now, it's true, is it not, that the condition of Mr. Goldman's shoes changed after they were bagged by the coroner's office? So there were more blood on those shoes after they were bagged and taken to the coroner's office than there were before. Isn't that correct?
I wasn't aware of that.
You're not aware of that? Have you seen any pictures that would indicate that?
I wasn't aware of that.
Did you ever talk to any expert in the field, a blood spatter expert, regarding this cast-off theory that you told us about yesterday?
Yes.
And did you ever write a report in your book regarding your belief about the cast-off theory?
No.
Is that ever written anywhere in any of these volumes of books that you have?
As to that droplet being a
Yes.
cast-off?
Yes.
No, I don't believe it is.
And did you ever testify about that before in any proceeding in this case?
No, I was never asked about that.
So your first time you testified about that was yesterday, right?
This is the first time I was asked about it.
And did you answer yes? First time you testified?
That's correct.
And it's not written in any publication or any reports you've written in this case, is that right?
That's correct.
With regard to this so-called mixture of the victim's bloods, do you know whether or not there's a more concentration of one victim's blood over the other in this so-called splatter? Do you know
No.
that? You have no knowledge of that, do you?
No.
Now, you talked to us yesterday about the bodies being in a rather close area and that the evidence was close to the bodies, or the evidence was right around the bodies. You recall that?
Yes.
And in that connection, the criminalists in this case, as I recall, did not arrive until after 10 o'clock because they'd been over at Rockingham. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, in some of the videos we've seen, we saw a man you identified, I think, as Johnson. Steve Johnson, was it?
Yes.
And he's one of the criminalists, a supervisor. Is that correct?
Yes.
The LAPD lab, SID lab, has more than two criminalists, don't they?
Yes.
And if you'd wanted to get other criminalists out there to start working on that scene at Bundy, you could have done that, couldn't you?
There was no need to, but I could have.
You could have done that?
Perhaps I could have, but I had expected the criminalists to come directly over from Rockingham.
And so when they got there after 10 o'clock, that was some 10 hours after these bodies had been found. Is that correct?
Approximately.
And at that time, since the coroners had finally been called, the coroners were there already when the criminalists arrived. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And then ultimately, you were present when these bodies were moved. Is that correct?
Yes, I was.
You described for us that your belief, let's strike that. Did you see the evidence move that we've talked about earlier when the bodies were moved? Do you see that?
Once again, my answer was then and still is now, I did not physically see them move.
All right. But at any rate, the bodies were moved, and had the criminalists finished their work at the time these bodies were moved?
No.
So Fung and Mazzola continued to do their work after the coroners and coroners representatives took the bodies away. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I want to show you part of a video that we've shown before in regard to Mr. Fung and his presence at the scene there that morning on June 13th.
All right, which exhibit is this, Mr. Cochran?
It's 10:43, I'm advised, Your Honor.
Mr. Cochran?
Yes, sir.
If you want to stand up and stretch for a moment, please feel free to do so. The audience can too as well. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. I want to have you take a look at this portion of the video. I believe you've seen this before. Now, just that gentleman there with the... now, stop it right there. Now, the man who's coming out of an area that you just went into, who is that?
It's Mr. Fung?
Is that the criminalist we've been talking about?
Yes.
And he has a bag in his right hand with no glove on that hand. Do you see that?
Yes.
And that's an area that you just went into, right?
That's correct.
And is that the area over wherein, the jury be familiar with the area where Mr. Goldman's body was found?
Yes.
Is that the area where, strike that, Mr. Fung is coming out of that area, is that correct? Is he about to step over Mr. Nicole Brown Simpson's body at that point? You can tell?
I can't tell whether the body has been moved out on the walkway at that point or not.
Well, do you see the man in the blue, and perhaps it may be one of the other body, do you see the man in the blue bent over Mr. Jacopo
Yes,
in the coroner's office? Do you
yes.
recall when you saw him there that day and working in that area on the walkway, he was working with bodies when he's at that location?
Yes, but I can't tell which body is here.
All right, I understand that. But it's apparently one of the bodies, is that correct?
It would appear that way, yes.
All right. Your Honor, we printed out this particular photograph, if we can, earlier, if the court pleases, and may I ask the court to allow me to mark this as 10, or A?
1043A?
1043A, that's all right, Your Honor.
All right, and this
I've
is...
shown it to counsel. 1043A.
Counter,
Now,
excuse
this-
me.
I'm sorry.
This is counter 01181801 on the counter.
Well, I have on the photograph 1181807, Your Honor. So it may continue.
That's in hundreds of seconds.
Hundreds of seconds, yes. So let's take it to 7. To 7.
There we go.
Photograph 7. So now we have it, Your Honor. All right, now, Mr. Lange, what does Mr. Fung have in that bag in his bare hand there?
I believe that's very possibly the right-hand glove from Rockingham.
Well, he had taken the right-hand glove from Rockingham into the area where Mr. Goldman's body was and where this left-hand glove was. Is that right?
I had asked him to look at the glove.
Can you answer that yes or no, sir? Had he taken the glove in there?
Unless I'm mistaken, this is very possibly the time that he brought the glove over to me to look at, yes.
All right. So the question is, yes, he had taken the glove inside that area?
Well, again, I'm trying to be as accurate as I can. I may be mistaken, but I had asked Mr. Fung if I could look at the glove from Rockingham. He brought it over to me, and I believe that this very possibly may depict that. I don't know for sure.
Now, this morning when I asked you, didn't you tell us, well, strike that. Is it your recollection now as you sit here that you had looked at the glove in the bag at this point?
I don't believe-
on this counter?
I don't believe I did. I believe I looked at the bag at the evidence truck after he walked out with it, if this in fact is that time.
All right. Well, what has he done just before this, if you know, with that bag?
I don't believe he did anything. If this in fact is the incident depicted here with the glove in the bag, he didn't do anything with it.
What was he doing over in the area of Mr. Goldman's body?
Well, again, I don't know if Mr. Goldman's body is back there or not at this point, because I don't know which body is out on the walkway. I have no idea.
All right, let's continue on with video. He apparently stepped over something. Did that refresh your recollection? He may have stepped over one of the bodies at that point?
Yes, Fung? Yes.
You see that? Back it up, back it up. Back it up. See that, can you see that drink? Somebody having a drink in their hand there? See
There's to
that?
be a cup in someone's hand, yes.
A cup at 11834.29. Now, that's a violation of the rules you told us about the other day, isn't it?
I don't know where he's standing. If I had seen that, I wouldn't have allowed it on the scene. I don't know if the cup is full, if it's empty, and I have never seen that cup at the scene.
Well, you see the scene, you see the cup at the scene now, sir?
Yes, I do.
All right, and that's, the question was, it's a violation of the rules you told us about yesterday. Isn't that correct, sir?
I would not allow that on my crime scene. That's my same answer. That's
Well,
correct.
I'm saying, do you see yourself up at the top?
Never mind. Proceed.
Okay. Do you see yourself up in the upper right-hand portion of this photograph?
I'm not looking for cups, Mr. Cochran.
I'm saying, do you see yourself at the scene, detective? Can you answer the question, please?
I'm trying to.
Okay, would you answer? Do you see yourself on the video here?
Yes.
All right. Now, do you see the cup on the video?
Yes, I do.
All right. And that's a violation of the rules you told us about, right?
That's correct.
Do you know whose hand that is? Who had that
No.
cup?
No.
Continue on. You see it again there?
Yes, Mr. Cochran, I saw it again.
Now, you notice, we stop for a moment. You see Mr. Fung there? He doesn't have anything on his hands there, does he? He has no,
Can't tell with that shot.
well, look at his right, on his right hip. So you're able to tell he does not have any gloves on his hands at that point? You able to tell that?
No.
You can't tell that, all right? Continue on. You see his hands now? You see Funk's hands now?
Yes, does not appear to have gloves on.
That's it.
Frame 5119.
118, 51, 19 year.
Yes.
It's set. Thank you. Remember, there's another video that rather than show it, I think we showed it earlier, I want to just approach the witness and ask him to identify, and then I'll put it on the Elmo if the court will allow. You have shown this to counsel, so I'll mark this as defendant's next in order.
This is where
1043B. Show it to counsel here.
1043B.
1043B, yes, ma'am. Now, Detective Lange, I'm going to place before you this photograph, which is a print actually, in video. Do you recognize the gentleman depicted therein?
Appears to be the photographer.
Is that Mr. Rokar?
It looks like Mr. Rokar, yes.
And in that photograph, can you see his camera there?
Yes.
His right shoulder?
That's correct.
And you see the line still up so that the crime scene is still intact at that point?
Yes.
He's inside the crime scene? Mr. Rokar's inside the crime scene?
Appears to be, yes.
All right, place on the Elmo, Your Honor. Now, that's a photograph of the photographer in this case, is that correct? You see his camera in his right hand, do you not?
Yes.
He apparently is looking inside of a mailbox there at the location?
It
that right?
appears that way.
Is that one of the jobs you assigned him that morning, to look inside that mailbox?
No. He may have been looking inside that mailbox to take a photograph of mail, however.
He may have been doing any number of things, but what we have is the photograph. Is that correct, sir?
When we have a photographer at the scene, we generally ask them initially to do orientation shots, and we do not supervise each and every one of them. I would certainly expect my photographer to show that initiative, and in this case, he appears to be showing that initiative.
He's showing you lots of initiative, is that right?
He's showing me the initiative that he's looking in that mailbox, and if there were mail in there, I'm sure he'd photographed it and told me about it.
Have you seen any photographs of mail in this case, sir?
He would have known unless he looked.
All right. Can you answer one question? Did you see any mail in that mailbox?
No.
All right. And then with regard to that, you had a report about him opening the mailbox to look inside the mailbox.
No.
And you didn't know anything about him doing this, so you saw the video, did you?
That's correct.
And do you know whether or not that mailbox had been dusted for prints before he did this?
I have no idea when this particular photograph was taken.
You have no idea whether he did this totally on his own, do you?
I believe, to me, it shows initiative that he did it. I have no idea when it was done.
That's not what I asked you, sir. Do you have any idea whether you have no idea when he did this, right?
That's correct.
And you not told him to do this, is that right?
No, I didn't.
The first time you became aware of this is when you saw this photograph, right?
Once again, that's true.
Do you know whether or not that mailbox had been dusted for any kind of prints at that point?
Same answer. I have no idea when this
All right.
photograph was taken, so
All
I
right.
can't give you that
Well,
answer.
thank you. Your Honor, we've marked that exhibit if the court pleases. And I would like also to mark 1043C is the photograph of the arm with the cup in it, which was at 11834.29. I placed that on the rear.
1043C.
1043C, and we'll pass that on, Your Honor. Now, with regard to this white sheet or blanket that we saw this morning and we've seen before, you have seen blood on that sheet and blanket. Isn't that correct? Did you not?
Yes.
That blood came from Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's body, or an area of her body?
Yes.
Now, you alluded to, I believe this morning, the fact that there had been a walkthrough which you had participated in with the defense, I think in August, on about August 27th of 1994. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And at that time, a knit cap was pointed out to you. And did you ever see the investigator, McNally, who was there, try that knit cap on?
No.
And you weren't interested in booking that knit cap, were you?
I had no interest in looking at no.
All right. And have you seen these knit caps where there's one size that fits all?
I suppose there is such a thing.
And what happened to that knit cap? Do you know?
I'm assuming that the
Do
family
you know what
collected
happened
it
to it?
with everything else. I did not follow up on the knit cap, no.
And what color was the knit cap, sir?
My recollection is either dark blue or black. I don't recall.
Appeared to be the same color as the knit cap that you allegedly found outside. Is that correct?
It was a dark color. I don't recall if it was the same color or not.
Did you take a photo of that particular cap that was pointed out to you that morning?
No.
Now, with regard to the children, we talked about this briefly. The police officer Vasquez overheard a statement wherein Sidney Simpson was speaking to her younger brother, Justin. Is that correct?
It's my understanding, yes.
And that statement is in a report provided by Vasquez. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And the subject of that statement deals with a phone call that their mother had received that night. Isn't that correct?
I don't know if it involves a phone call. I thought it involved an overhear on the part of Sydney. I'm
Well-
not sure, though. I haven't reviewed it in some time.
An overhear of a phone call, sir. Isn't that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The subject matter you're not here to say.
What's the objection? Sustained.
Asking about the subject matter, Your Honor.
That involves hearsay. Sustained.
So did it involve a overhear of a conversation?
Objection, Your Honor.
That's not a hearsay.
That's
Overhear of a
not the
conversation is not
subject. What,
hearsay.
what went on is...
Yes. Did it involve an overhear of a conversation? Telephone
believe it
conversation?
I believe it did.
When's the last time you've seen Vasquez's report?
When you showed it to me in court several days ago,
All right, and she's still with the Los Angeles Police Department?
I don't know.
You don't know that?
I don't know.
In the course of your investigation, did you ever ascertain whether or not Nicole Brown Simpson received a phone call from Faye Resnick that night?
I did not have that information, no.
With regard to your theory of this not being a drug killing, would that ever be relevant to you, given the facts I gave you before regarding Faye Resnick, and whether or not there was a phone call from Faye Resnick at about 9 o'clock or thereafter on the night of June 12, 1994? Would that have been important to you as an investigator, from Faye Resnick to Nicole Brown Simpson?
Yes?
That would be important to you?
Well, I'd like to talk to Faye Resnick, not because I thought it was a drug-related murder, but anyone who spoke with the victim I'd be interested in.
Well, you talked to her at lunchtime today, and without giving us that conversation, that's the first time you've talked to her since you read the book?
I think he's already answered that question.
The book, Your Honor? I don't think I've asked that question.
Said he read
Yes,
the
sir.
book when it first came out, and he told us about talking to her this afternoon. He's already told us about this.
All right, there we go. When you were at Rockingham, it's your testimony that you came in the rear of Mr. Simpson's home. Is that correct?
Initially, yes.
And when you came in the rear of that house, you remember what order you came into the house, sir?
No.
And did Arnell Simpson come in first?
She may have.
What, did she have a key?
Seems to me she did key her way in.
And do you recall whether or not the alarm was on at that house at that time, sir?
No,
You don't recall?
that's correct.
You have no recollection of whether or not she had to turn the alarm off at some point?
She may have. My attention wasn't focused on her.
But at any rate, if she did it after she came inside the house from the rear, right?
I would assume that.
Now, yesterday you described during redirect examination how you allowed Detective Furman to interview Mr. Cato Kalin in his room. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did you specifically tell him to do that, or you just told him, you just didn't stop him from doing that?
It's the way things happened. He was walking in front of me. I was going towards the house to knock on the rear door. He walked to the guest house and knocked on the guest door. He was the one that happened to be there to do that.
Okay, now my question, let's get back to my question. My question was, did you specifically tell him to do that at all?
Specifically tell him to knock
Go
on
and
the
interview
door.
Cato Kalin. Did you tell him to do that?
No.
All right. Yesterday, you indicated at some point in your examination, did you use the words, "I work for Van Adder"? Did you say that?
I work for Van Adder.
Did you use the words, "I work for Van Adder"? Was that in the transcript? Strike that. I won't put it. That's a bad question. Did you say that? I saw it in the transcript. Did you say that? "I work for Van Adder"?
In relation to testimony yesterday?
Yes, sir, in relation to testimony yesterday.
I don't recall saying that.
You don't recall saying that?
No.
Did you work for Van Adder on that date?
No.
You were co-lead investigators, is that right?
We work as partners, that's correct.
You were asked a series of questions yesterday by Ms. Clark about, I believe, candles and the state of burning of those candles. And so that we're clear, there are no photographs of these candles to assist us now as we look back to try and determine how much they burn. Is that correct?
I have no photographs, that's correct.
All right. And not only you, there are no photographs in this case of those candles. Is that right?
I recently observed a video that has the candles in them, yes.
All right. Where did you observe that video?
I believe that was a compilation of news releases, news stories, and news videos that were received from the defense,
Where did you receive it from the defense?
from you,
And you saw this? You saw a candle burning? In what room?
in the front room,
In the living room area?
yes.
Is there any pictures or that you ever took of any candles burning?
No, I already testified. We took no pictures of the candles burning.
The only burning candle you've seen is a video turned over by the defense to the prosecution. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When did you see that?
When?
Yes. What date was it?
I believe it was last Friday night
Last Friday night? And where were you at that time when you saw it?
in this building.
And who were you with?
Myself,
By yourself, alone?
by myself,
On Friday night, watching videos?
by myself, alone, watching videos.
I won't say anything else about that. And you... Excuse me. Thank you.
I was asked to do it.
All right, you asked to do it by Ms. Clark? Okay. Well, explain that. Huh? And who asked you to do that?
Ms. Clark?
Ms. Clark? All right. Did she watch any of those videos with you?
No.
Now, yesterday, Ms. Clark went through an attempt to try and explain the The 115, 116, 117 photo ID numbers and the evidence numbers. Do you remember that?
It
Well,
is.
I-
It
well-
is. It is.
Attempt, well, okay, I'll take out the word attempt. Yesterday, Ms. Clark asked you some questions about 115, 116, 117, and the photo ID numbers and the numbers assigned to evidence in this case. Do you recall that?
Yes.
As I understood what you indicated to us, you said that the answers to the difference between the photo ID numbers and the items that were assigned to evidence are located in the voluminous 30,000 pages of reports in this case. Is that what you basically said to us? I'm asking you.
It states the evidence.
What, do you hear?
States the evidence.
Well, didn't you say the answer to the 115, 116, 117 was contained in the reports in this case? Did you say that?
I believe I said the property reports.
Yes. Did you say that? And among the reports in this case, there are how many pages?
It states the testimony.
Overruled.
Among the reports,
Overruled.
okay. Among the reports in this case, how many pages are there altogether, if you know? Property reports and all reports.
Objection, that's irrelevant.
Overruled.
As to the entire investigation,
Yes, sir.
several thousand.
Several thousand?
Yes.
You heard the term 30,000?
I don't know if there are that many. At least not generated by the police department. After the case was filed, of course, there was a lot more that went on.
Now, with regard to that glove that we saw, strike that. With regard to the bag that we saw on the video that we showed you regarding Mr. Fung, after having seen that, is your memory refreshed as to whether or not it was after we saw Mr. Fung stepping out of the area where Mr. Goldman was that you then went out to the van and looked inside of the envelope, inside of the paper bag, rather?
Again, if this was the bag that had the glove in it, I would have done that. I don't know if this was that particular bag or if Mr. Fung was back there doing something else. It's unclear to me whether Mr. Goldman was still back in that position or not, so I can't give you a time frame and I can't give you an answer.
Well, did you see Mr. Fung at the scene that morning after he got there after 10 o'clock on the 13th with more than one paper bag as he appeared in the video?
I saw him with various bags at different times, yes.
Were the other bags that you saw similar to that bag?
Yes.
How many bags did you see him with at all that day?
I don't recall. I believe they put one piece of evidence in one bag, so I observed 2 or 3 bags in the area. I don't recall specifically.
Now, with regard to shoe prints at the scene there of that particular evening, we've had a lot of testimony about shoe prints leading and heading west of where the bodies were found. Were you ever able to determine or make any copies or take any photographs of any shoe prints that were in the dirt area where Mr. Goldman's body was found?
I observed none in the dirt area.
And in fact, we know, do we not, that you stepped in that area, did you not?
I did.
Detective Furman stepped in that area, did he not?
Appears that way.
And Mr. Fung stepped in that area based upon that video, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
At least those 3. And there may have been others, isn't that correct?
Possibly.
And we know also that footprints aren't always, or shoe prints aren't always visible with the naked eye, isn't that correct?
I would say not.
Overruled.
Under these circumstances in the dirt, I examined it before I went in there, and I saw none. I couldn't imagine invisible prints being in the dirt.
That's not the question. I didn't ask you about in the dirt. I said shoe prints aren't always visible with the naked eye. Isn't that correct, shoe prints?
Overruled.
In the dirt?
No, I ask you, are shoe prints sometimes
Depends on the
not
surface.
visible?
Mr. Cochran, it would depend on the surface.
All right.
If you were to ask me that on a flat,
You've
smooth
answered the question.
surface,
You've answered.
No, objection.
Overruled. It was just a question, are some
Shoe prints.
shoe prints not necessarily visible to the eye?
All right.
Yes
Is that-
or no?
Yes, yes or no? Are some shoe prints not necessarily visible with the naked eye?
you're not referring to dirt strictly? I thought you were
Excuse me,
referring to dirt.
counsel. Also, we've covered this twice already.
I want to ask, go into a specific area, Your Honor. I want to ask this. I thought he had, Your Honor, but I'm not
This is
sure
about
now.
the third time we're visiting it with
I'm not
with
sure,
this
Your Honor, now.
witness.
Based upon where the answer is,
I'm
I'm not
sure.
sure. Well, I'm sure we did cover it. I'm not sure of the answer now is what I'm indicating.
No, we got the same answer the last
Okay.
time.
May I ask this question again? Let me try to get an answer, Your Honor.
Quickly.
Are footprints and shoe prints sometimes not visible in the naked eye, depending upon the surface that they're on?
Yes.
All right? And with regard to the area of the dirt in this case, did you take any photographs or any photographs taken by you of any possible shoe prints that might be in that dirt area that morning?
There were none there, so there's no reason to take photographs.
So you didn't take any? You didn't take any photographs, is that right?
There was nothing to take photographs
All
of.
right. So that if Mr. Goldman's assailant had stepped in the dirt and there were no shoe prints, and he left out like you did and walked along that walkway trying to avoid the blood, there'd be no shoe prints for you to see. Isn't that correct?
I don't know. I saw none in the dirt.
Well, that's what you did, is it not? You stepped in there and you stepped out, tried to avoid any bloody shoe prints, did you not?
I did.
And since you weren't there, you don't know whether or not Mr. Goldman's assailant may have done that same thing. Isn't that correct?
Objection, that's speculation.
I'm asking you.
I have no idea what his assailant did.
Just like you have
Other
no
than
idea of whether
the
or not...
assailant, may I finish?
Hold on. Mr. Cochran, let him finish the
Thought
answer
he was finished, Your Honor.
before you start answering
Thought
next.
he was finished.
The evidence clearly shows that the suspect went the opposite way because of the bloody shoe prints west on the sidewalk, not east on the walkway.
Well, sir, if you couldn't see the prints, how do you know that? You were not there.
I did see the prints. There were
But
bloody shoe prints.
If
I
there
saw
was,
them.
if there were shoe prints that were not visible with the naked eye, how would you know that? You were not there.
That's argumentative, counsel.
All right. Now, in that connection, yesterday when you told us that Mr. Goldman was surprised by this attacker, that's a theory of yours. You were not there. Is that correct?
It's correct that I was not there.
All right. And that's your theory, is that not?
I believe there's a possibility that he was surprised, yes.
All right. That's a possibility. It's also a possibility he wasn't surprised. Isn't that correct?
The indicators to me are that he was, but again, as you stated, I wasn't there. I can't say.
And with regard to whether or not Mr. Goldman struck his assailant or assailants, you don't know that either, do you, sir? You can only tell us what your theory is. Is that
I
correct?
can only interpret the evidence that I have for you.
All right. And the evidence you have, you shared with us, and you're part of the prosecution team. Isn't that correct?
I am, yes.
Now, you talked about yesterday taking a statement from Mr. O.J. Simpson. You recall that?
That's correct.
And when you talked to Mr. Simpson, he was cooperative, was he not?
That is a subjective thing. He was cooperative to the extent that he sat down and spoke with us. But
He didn't have to talk to you, did he, sir?
Objection, he's not finished his
I
answer.
thought he was finished. You may continue.
Oh, that's...
I don't believe he was cooperative in being entirely forthcoming with me.
That's, again, your opinion, isn't it? Which you're giving us all day today and yesterday. That's your opinion, right?
That's argumentative.
All right. Well, there's a tape recording of this interview.
Oral.
All right. There is a tape recording of this interview, is there not?
Yes, there is.
It's about 33 minutes, is that correct?
That's correct.
The beginning of that interview, you tell him that he doesn't have to talk to you.
Beyond the scope.
I think, Your Honor, this part, I'd like to be heard with regard to this part.
Well, we're beyond the scope of redirect.
I'd like to leave of court with regard to these series of questions, and I'll be wrapping this part up.
First one, if counsel wants to make an argument, so I'm not...
All right.